What do you have in the trunk of the vehicle?
Personal equipment, officer.
Do you consent to me searching the vehicle?
No, sir, I do not consent to any searches.
You can do everything right, wear the uniform of your country with honor, and still find yourself staring down the barrel of a misunderstanding that could end your career. Or worse, this is what happens when deep-seated assumptions override the law on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, turning a mundane drive into a chilling lesson on the fragility of our civil rights. Picture the town of Oak Creek. It is one of those classic American communities anchored by a massive military installation just a few miles down the interstate. For decades, the town and the base have existed in a state of symbiotic tension. The local economy relies on the steady influx of soldiers, yet there is a subtle, unspoken divide between the locals who have lived there for generations and the transient military personnel who pass through. It is late October, and the afternoon sky is a flat, pale gray. The air is crisp, carrying the faint scent of dried leaves and the distant low-frequency rumble of heavy artillery training from the base. Inside the Rusty Spoon Diner, the lunchtime rush has thinned to a low, comfortable murmur. Listen to the room. There is the clinking of heavy ceramic coffee mugs hitting formica tables, the rhythmic scrape of a spatula on a greasy flat-top grill, and the soft, staticky hum of a country song playing from a radio near the register. Sitting in a corner booth are two men. The first is Captain Marcus Hayes. He is 32 years old, an Army logistics officer with 2 deployments under his belt. He is wearing his daily operational camouflage pattern uniform, his posture naturally rigid even when he is trying to relax. His face shows the subtle, permanent fatigue of a man who routinely wakes up at 4 in the morning. Across from him is his younger brother, Julian. Julian is 26, a freelance graphic designer visiting from out of state. Unlike Marcus, Julian is dressed in a faded vintage band t-shirt, a loose-fitting flannel, and worn-out sneakers. His hair is a bit long, and he has a restless, artistic energy that sharply contrasts with his brother's disciplined stillness. They are finishing a late lunch, catching up on family news. The conversation is easy, punctuated by the kind of familiar silence only siblings share. Marcus checks his watch. He has a briefing back on base in 2 hours. But before that, he needs to drop off a piece of specialized equipment at a local community center where he is volunteering for a veteran outreach program. The equipment is packed inside a large olive drab Pelican case resting on the floor beside their booth. It is a heavy, reinforced, waterproof container, the kind typically used to transport sensitive electronics or firearms. In this instance, it holds a high-end projector, a laptop, and some display materials. As they pay their bill and step out into the brisk autumn air, the heavy glass door of the diner swinging shut behind them with a definitive thud, they are unaware that they are being watched. An older man, a regular at the diner who owns a neighboring hardware store, is sitting in his pickup truck across the parking lot. He is sipping a lukewarm coffee, his eyes tracking the brothers. He sees a military officer. He sees a scruffy, long-haired civilian. And then he sees the olive drab Pelican case. It takes both men a bit of effort to hoist the heavy military-grade box into the trunk of Julian's dusty 10-year-old Honda Civic with out-of-state license plates. The hardware store owner reaches for his phone. He does not see two brothers. Through the lens of his own ingrained assumptions, he sees something suspicious. He sees a mismatch. He sees out-of-state plates, a rough-looking civilian, and a soldier moving what looks like a weapons case. He dials the local non-emergency dispatch. In a low, urgent voice, he reports a suspicious situation at the diner. He tells the dispatcher that a military officer might be selling gear, or worse, transferring weapons to a shady civilian. It is a leap of logic built entirely on visual bias. But once the call is made, the machinery of law enforcement is set into motion a mile away. Oak Creek Police Chief Thomas Miller is on patrol. Chief Miller is a 20-year veteran of the force. He is not a cartoon villain. He is a man who loves his town, but he is also a man who relies heavily on what he calls his street instinct. Over the years, that instinct has quietly morphed into a rigid set of biases. He believes he can spot a bad situation just by looking at the cast of characters. When the dispatch call comes over the radio, the static breaking the silence of his cruiser, Miller's ears perk up. The dispatcher relays the tip, a possible illegal transfer of military property involving a uniformed officer and an unidentified civilian in an out-of-state vehicle currently heading northbound on Elm Street. Miller acknowledges the call. He flips his turn signal, the rhythmic clicking echoing in the quiet cab of his Ford Explorer, and accelerates. He catches up to Julian's faded Honda Civic just as it merges onto the main arterial road leading toward the community center. Miller does not immediately turn on his lights. Instead, he trails them. He is waiting for a pretext. In the eyes of the law, a vague, anonymous tip about a box being loaded into a car does not meet the threshold for a traffic stop. He needs a reason, however minor. Inside the Civic, the atmosphere is light. Julian has the heater running, the fan humming loudly as he talks about his latest design project. Marcus is looking out the passenger window, his mind slowly shifting back to the base and his upcoming briefing. Then Marcus's eyes catch the side mirror. He sees the distinct, heavy grille of a police cruiser tailing them. He does not panic. He simply notes it, his military training making him hyper aware of his surroundings. Cop behind us. Marcus says, his voice perfectly level. Julian's eyes dart to the rearview mirror. The universal jolt of civilian anxiety spikes in his chest. Was I speeding? He asks, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. No, you're fine. Marcus replies, just keep driving normal. But normal is never enough when an officer is actively looking for a violation. As Julian navigates a sweeping curve, his right tire touches the solid white line on the edge of the road for a fraction of a second. It is a trivial error, one made by thousands of drivers every day. But for Chief Miller, it is the opening he needs. Suddenly, the cruiser's light bar erupts in a blinding flash of red and blue, reflecting off the Civic's rearview mirror and washing the interior in a chaotic strobe. The siren gives a short, sharp chirp. Pull over slowly. Marcus instructs, his tone shifting from brotherly to authoritative. Turn off the engine, roll down both windows, and put your hands on the wheel. Julian complies, guiding the old car onto the gravel shoulder. The sound of rocks crunching beneath the tire seems unnaturally loud. He cuts the engine. The silence that follows is thick, heavy with anticipation. They listen to the heavy thud of the cruiser's door closing. They hear the slow, deliberate crunch of heavy boots walking up the passenger side of the vehicle. Chief Miller approaches with his hand resting casually near his duty belt. It is a posture of authority designed to establish dominance before a single word is spoken. He stops just behind the passenger window, leaning in slightly to get a full view of both men. Afternoon, Miller says, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. Reason I stopped you, son, is you failed to maintain your lane back there, swerved right over the white line. I apologize. Officer, Julian says, his voice tight, I didn't realize license, registration, and proof of insurance. Miller demands. As Julian reaches into the glove compartment, moving slowly and narrating his actions exactly as Marcus had taught him years ago, Miller's eyes scan the interior. He takes in Marcus's uniform. He takes in Julian's appearance. His internal bias is already assembling a narrative. The anonymous tip is echoing in his mind. he decides to push the boundary. Where are you boys headed? Miller asks, employing a classic conversational interrogation tactic, just running an errand in town. Sir. Marcus answers smoothly, keeping his hands visible on his lap. Miller's gaze shifts entirely to Marcus. You stationed at the base, Captain? Yes. Sir. Logistical command. And who is this with you? My brother. Marcus replies, keeping his voice carefully neutral. Miller takes Julian's documents, glancing at the out-of-state license, long way from home. Julian, what do you have in the trunk? This is the exact moment the legal boundary is tested. Under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution, a police officer can conduct a traffic stop for a minor violation. However, the United States Supreme Court ruled in the landmark case of Rodriguez v. Fort, United States, that an officer cannot prolong a traffic stop beyond the time reasonably required to complete the mission of the stop, which in this case is writing a ticket or giving a warning for crossing the white line, unless, of course, the officer develops independent, reasonable, articulable suspicion that a new crime is afoot, a vague hunch, or a third-party call about a heavy box. Rarely clears that high legal hurdle. Julian hesitates. He looks at Marcus. Marcus shifts slightly, just some personal items. Chief, are we receiving a citation for the lane violation? It is a polite, professional deflection. But to Chief Miller, it feels like a challenge to his authority. The subtle pushback ignites his frustration. He is used to compliance, especially from out-of-towners. I asked a simple question. Captain, Miller says, his tone dropping an octave, the false friendliness vanishing. We got a call about some suspicious activity involving you two and a large military-style case. Now, I can ask nice, or we can do this the hard way. Marcus looks directly into Miller's eyes. He understands the mechanics of this situation intimately. He knows that giving consent waives their Fourth Amendment rights. He also knows that a black civilian and a uniformed officer on a dusty roadside with a suspicious cop is a powder keg. He breathes in slowly, controlling his heart rate. Chief, Marcus says, his voice impossibly calm. With all due respect, my brother crossed a white line. If you are going to write a ticket, please do so. But we do not consent to any searches of the vehicle. Miller's jaw clench. The dash cam in his cruiser and the body cam on his chest are recording every word, but in the heat of the moment, his ego takes the wheel. He steps back from the car, step out of the vehicle. Miller box, pointing a thick finger at Julian. Both of you, are we under arrest? Marcus asks, remaining seated. You are being detained pending an investigation. Step out of the vehicle now. The tension in the air is suddenly suffocating. Julian is trembling, his breath shallow. Marcus gives him a reassuring nod, unbuckling his seatbelt. They open their doors, the cold air rushing into the cabin, and step out onto the gravel. Miller directs them to stand at the rear of the Civic, directly in front of the cruiser's dash cam. Miller grabs his shoulder radio. Dispatch, I need a K9 unit to my location. Elm Street, just past the overpass. This is the procedural failure unfolding in real time. Miller has now officially prolonged the traffic stop. He has no probable cause to search the trunk, and the vague anonymous tip does not provide the reasonable suspicion necessary to detain them indefinitely while waiting for a drug dog. He is operating purely on a toxic mixture of bias, a bruised ego, and a dangerous assumption that his badge grants him immunity from the constitutional constraints of his job. Minutes stretch into an agonizing eternity. The wind bites at Julian's thin flannel shirt. Marcus stands in the parade rest position, his hands clasped behind his back, his face a mask of practiced stoicism. He does not speak. He does not argue. He simply lets the officer make his mistakes on camera. Miller paces near the side of the road, occasionally casting suspicious glares at the trunk of the car. He is convinced he has stumbled onto something massive. He is convinced he is about to bust a stolen military equipment ring. 15 minutes later, a secondary cruiser pulls up, its lights flashing silently. It is not a K9 unit. It is Surgeon Davis, Miller's second in command. Davis is a younger, strictly by-the-book officer. He steps out of his vehicle, his boots hitting the pavement with a heavy thud, and walks over to Miller. What do we have? Chief Davis asks, looking at the two men standing by the Civic. Got a call about these two loading a suspicious military case into the trunk. Driver swerved. They're refusing a search. I've got a dog on the way. Davis frowns. He looks at Marcus, instantly recognizing the rank and the unit insignia. He looks back at Miller. Chief, a call about a case isn't PC. For search. And keeping them here this long for a lane violation, we're deep into a Rodriguez violation. If that dog alerts and we open that trunk, any defense attorney is going to tear this apart. I'm not letting them drive away with stolen government property. Miller whispers harshly. Marcus, having overheard the exchange, finally breaks his silence. His voice carries effortlessly over the wind. Sergeant Davis, if the chief here is so deeply concerned about the safety of the community that he is willing to violate my brother's civil rights, I will voluntarily open the trunk, not because he has the right to demand it, but because I have a briefing in 45 minutes and I refuse to be late. Miller looks triumphant. He gestures toward the trunk. Open it. Julian looks at Marcus, betrayed, but Marcus just nods. Julian pulls the keys from his pocket, walks to the back of the car, and pops the trunk. The latch clicks loudly in the quiet afternoon. The lid rises. There, sitting squarely in the middle of the dusty trunk, is the heavy olive drab Pelican case. Miller steps forward, resting his hand on his duty belt again. Open the case. Marcus steps up beside his brother. He reaches down and unlatches the 4 heavy metal clasps. They pop open with a series of sharp metallic snaps. Marcus lifts the heavy lid. Miller leans in, expecting to see stolen ordnance, illegal weapons, or smuggled contraband. Instead, he sees a neatly coiled power cord. He sees a high-definition projector. He sees a stack of glossy pamphlets. At the very top is a printed schedule for the Oak Creek Veterans Outreach Center, detailing a seminar on transitioning from military to civilian careers. The silence that falls over the roadside is profound. The wind seems to stop. The only sound is the distant, mocking caw of a crow. Sergeant Davis closes his eyes for a brief second. Shaking his head almost imperceptibly, Chief Miller stands frozen, his eyes darting from the projector to Marcus's face. The narrative he had built in his head, the grand bust he had envisioned, shatters against the mundane reality of the equipment. It's a projector, Miller says, his voice devoid of its earlier thunder. Yes, Chief. Marcus says quietly, it is a projector. My brother, the graphic designer, helped me create the presentation materials for the veterans in your community. We were loading it into the car to drop it off before my shift. Marcus does not raise his voice. He does not demand an apology. He simply lets the crushing weight of the chief's error settle over the scene. Can we go now? Julian asks, his voice shaking slightly. A mix of relief and lingering adrenaline. Miller clears his throat, his face flushed. You're free to go. Keep it between the lines. He turns on his heel and walks quickly back to his cruiser, unable to maintain eye contact with the man he just unlawfully detained. Marcus gently closes the Pelican case. He shuts the trunk. He and Julian get back into the car. As they pull away, leaving the 2 police cruisers idling on the gravel shoulder, the tension finally bleeds out of the cabin. Julian lets out a long, shaky exhale. Marcus simply looks straight ahead, his jaw tight. In television shows, a moment like this is usually followed by instant karma, a dramatic firing, a fiery speech, or immediate justice. But in reality, consequences are a slow, grinding mechanism. Marcus did not let the incident vanish into the wind. Later that evening, he filed a formal, meticulously documented complaint with the Oak Creek Police Department's Internal Affairs Division, citing specific Fourth Amendment violations, the illegal extension of a traffic stop, and the pretextual nature of the detention. Because of Marcus's rank and because he CC'd the base commander's legal liaison, the complaint could not be swept under the rug. The body cam and dash cam footage were pulled. The footage was undeniable. It showed a veteran police officer escalating a routine stop based entirely on a fabricated narrative and an anonymous, baseless tip. It highlighted the dangerous combination of unchecked authority and confirmation bias. Chief Miller was not fired immediately. That is rarely how the real world works. But he was quietly placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. The local newspaper got wind of the story, sparking a series of uncomfortable town hall meetings about the relationship between the police, the local community, and the military personnel stationed nearby. Miller's reputation, built over 20 years of what he called instinct, was irreparably fractured by 20 minutes of recorded arrogance. The system eventually worked, but only because Captain Marcus Hayes possessed the precise combination of legal knowledge, emotional control, and institutional backing to challenge it, which leaves a chilling thought hanging in the air long after the dust on Elm Street has settled. What if Marcus had not known his rights? What if he had lost his temper just for a second under the immense pressure of a badge and a gun? What if he was just a regular civilian without the armor of a military uniform and a pristine record? When those sworn to uphold the law allow their assumptions to override the Constitution, the line between public safety and public threat disappears entirely.